Then he sent them to Bethlehem with these instructions: "Go and make a careful search for the child, and when you find him, let me know, so that I too may go and worship him." They went on their way, and lo, the star, which they had seen in the east, went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw this, they were overwhelmed with joy. Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshiped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts: gold and frankincense and myrrh.
It's been my practice here to read a story on Christmas Eve, and so I have fun looking for a story each year. And we can all be kids for a few minutes. This story is called The Gold of Bernardino. It's kind of old school. It was written in the 40s. I hope you like it as much as I do. Long ago, there lived high up in the Cantabrian hills of Spain a peasant. He was a strong giant of a man with gentle hands for creatures and children, a quiet, friendly way of speaking, and an exceedingly simple heart. He lived by himself with the oxen that drew his plow, the goats that gave him milk, and the dog that ran bouncingly at his heels. No churches had yet been built in Spain, but there came one spring a saintly man, a friar, climbing the hills to the peasant's hut, there to dwell with him many days while he told of a new God and of his Son, a holier man than all others, one who had been born and had died and had been born again. Every night after the day's plowing, the friar would read out of a small handwritten book about this Jesus, the Christ. He had much to tell. A new religion had been called after him, Christianity. And there were many stories not written down which had been passed from mouth to mouth. I would become a Christian, said the peasant Bernardino. I would follow this Jesus, the Christ. It came naturally, therefore, that the friar before he left, should baptize him. And he actually gave him the name Bernardino, by which he became known. Now, being one who seldom got to the village, Bernardino was fearful lest he forgot all that the friar had told him. So he began repeating to the animals the stories and all that had been read out of the handwritten book concerning the sayings of Jesus the Christ. While Bernardino cleared new land and plowed, he would talk with the oxen, saying, "Slow and gentle ones, it is well that you should hear. Listen then." And that same day went out Jesus out of the house and sat by the sea. When he milked the goats at nightfall, he would time his words to the dripping of the milk in his pail. "Good, my sisters, this is for your ears, these blessings. Blessed are the poor in spirit." And before he slept, with the dog lying beside the hearth, he would tell of the lame, the halt, and the blind, and how they were healed by the laying on of hands. Small, faithful one, he was of all people the most holy. He fitted the story of Jesus the Christ to the seasons, so that with the winter solstice he began with the shepherds of their watching, of the angels, the star, the manger, and the newborn babe. Hosanna, glory to God in the highest. That is good, but hearken to something better, my beasts. On earth, peace, goodwill toward all. That is something for beasts and people to carry in their hearts always. He would tell with wonder, with bitterness, with grief that made his eyes overflow and sent tears coursing down the furrows of his cheeks, only to fall upon the furrows of the earth, all that had to do with the life and the death of Jesus the Christ. But always he came back to the winter solstice with a fresh heart. Always he began, "Listen, lowly ones, we come again to the birth." Then only did he know joy unbound. From that first telling of the birth had sprung a great resolve, and this he shared with no one, only the animals. "I shall go some day to Bethlehem at Christmas time, when again the child is born. I too shall worship at his manger. You shall see." It meant gold for passage, gold for food, and a gift when he should reach the lowly stable. Ships of many countries from the east, the south, the north were always making port in the harbor, needing to be revictualled. He would carry half of his harvest each year to the sea and sell it for gold. He would talk with the sailors about this place called Bethlehem. He would find out from them the length of time for the pilgrimage and what it would cost. From the time he made that first journey to the harbor, Bernardino strung a leather pouch around his waist, and in it he put his first piece of gold. It would take 10 pieces for his undertaking and a half year's time. If he started at the autumn equinox, he would be back in time for the spring planting. That was good. The beasts would care for themselves, and he would have much to tell them when he returned. Bernardino was a young man when the friar had baptized him, and he was at his prime when the pouch was full and the autumn equinox at hand. The gold from this last harvest would provide the gift for the child. He never doubted he would find Bethlehem, never doubted that the child would be there, newborn. The eve of his departure came. The clumsy two-wheeled cart was loaded against the morning's journey. Bernardino was stooping over the hearth, putting into the carefully raked embers the oaten cakes wrapped in cabbage leaves, which would furnish some of the food he would need. He happened to look up. A small, struggling figure was weaving its uncertain way up the path to the hut. Before the peasant could regain his feet, the figure had stumbled forward and dropped face down, not 2 meters from the door. Bernardino reached the figure and crouched beside it. It was a lad, his clothes torn from him, his back lashed in places clean to the bone. Who has dared? The peasant was angered at what he saw, a lad so small, so young, to be so trod upon. He lifted him with great tenderness, bore him inside, and put him carefully down upon his bed. Then he gathered healing herbs and gum from the trees, making of these a balm to put upon the wounds. Coming to consciousness, the lad would have fled had he not been so weak from loss of blood. It took no strength to restrain him, but it took much gentling of speech, much coaxing to get him to swallow some warm milk Bernardino held to his lips. Stark terror was in the lad's eyes. That too will take healing, Bernardino thought. A day came when the lad was well enough to run around. Twice now his lips had broken into a smile when Bernardino had clapped his hands at the lad's quick understanding of a language strange to him. The moon had waxed from the first quarter to full when a man climbed the hill. He carried a sword. The lad took flight at the sight of him, and by signs the stranger made Bernardino know that he had come hunting for that boy, a slave, to take him back to his ship from which he had fled. In the end, Bernardino brought out his gold and paid the 10 pieces demanded for the lad's freedom. It is well, the peasant thought. Now I'll have someone to leave with land and beasts when I go. And he bent his whole strength and heart to teaching the boy to forget fear and understand what freedom meant, and in helping him to a mastery of his language, this that he might have human ears in which to pour the stories of Jesus the Christ and all that had been written down in that small book. Harvest multiplied. Now in the autumn, when he and the lad went together to the harbor to sell the grain, the cabbages, the goat's cheese, the wine, there were 2 gold pieces to put into the leather pouch. 5 years beat themselves out as swiftly as a swallow beats his way across the water, and again came the time for Bernardino's departure. His mind and heart were filled with the joy of going, of forecasting that moment when his feet would cross the threshold of the stable, and he would be kneeling there before the child. It will all be to tell you when I come back. Watch for the star. Always I look for it, for who can tell when again it might appear and mark the way. Night had fallen, the oaten cakes were done, and the lad sat peeling off the burned cabbage leaves and laying each cake carefully in the sack Bernardino would carry with him. Suddenly the quiet of the night was cut in twain by a shouting of voices, and out of the darkness came 4 robed figures, friars, holy men, even such as one who had come years before. Bernardino rose to welcome them, to give them food and bed them down as best he could, he and the lad going out to the shed to sleep with the beasts. But before he went, the friars had a strange thing to tell. All over God's world, people were beginning to build churches in which to worship Jesus the Christ. Such a church they had come to build, and a monastery to house their holy order. They would need the help of strong men. They would need all the contributions the followers of Jesus the Christ could bring together. To this strange tale, there was but one answer for Bernardino. He must give his gold. Would he have ever heard of the child or Bethlehem? Had not a holy man brought the tale to him? He would stay and help build the church. It might be the will of God that he do his worshiping here, not in Bethlehem. So a new life began for Bernardino. He worked the ground as little as was needful to feed himself and the lad and the 4 who had come. From the first coming of light, back of the hills, to the last shaft of it beyond the sea, he worked at the felling of trees, the shaping of great beams, the curving of them to a vaulted roof. As they worked together, the holy men taught Bernardino certain chants that had come to be a part of the worship. These they sang, and the hills gave them back in full echo. It took years for the building of the church and the monastery. When it was all completed, Bernardino was an old man, having more years than he could remember. There had been times when rebellion and anger filled his heart, when he had fought against the work that was allotted him and the dying piece by piece of his dream of Bethlehem. But these times grew less fearful, less often, and he found much consolation in the worship and prayer in the chapel. There had come from some far distant place a figure of Jesus the Christ upon the cross, with thorns to crown him, and another of Mary, his mother, in a blue robe and a golden crown on her head. The brothers called her the Virgin of Light, and Bernardino found much solace in kneeling, telling her all that was in his heart. It was hard to pray to the one upon the cross, for never had he so conceived him. Often he protested to the brothers. Why hang him there year after year? Preach the crucifixion, yes, and the resurrection at Easter, but show Jesus the Christ as the child newborn, always newborn. That's what we must remember. It is the birth we worship, not the death. The older he grew, the oftener he protested. It is Bethlehem we seek, not Calvary. Come, let us have here the child lying within his manger. But Who had ever heard of such a thing to be put in a consecrated church built on ground made holy? He's getting more ancient than the oldest tree, said one. Sometimes I think he must have come to Spain with the good Santiago, said another. He's growing foolish, as old men will, said a third. He will soon die. But Bernardino did not die. He lived on far beyond his allotted years. Many friars had come to the monastery. Pilgrims climbed the hills to worship there. The brothers gave Bernardino light tasks to perform that would not try his waning strength. But as he drew water, brought sticks from the woods, out of a mind often befogged would come to him the wonder of why he should live on. Why had he not died, as those first friars with whom he had worked to build the church? And one day the answer to this came. How could he die until he had seen Bethlehem? Had he not made the promise to worship where the living Christ was born? It was not enough to kneel before a dying Christ. He must find the living one. There came a winter of great snows and high piercing winds that shook the monastery on the hills and chilled the brothers to their marrow. Bernardino was let bring his goatskins inside and sleep beside the fire in the hall. So it happened that on the eve of Christmas, when the brothers had withdrawn, after Compline, to their cells, to await the celebration of the Christmas Mass, Bernardino lay asleep. As he slept, he dreamed. Youth had come back to him, strength to his limbs and joy to his heart. He felt again the impending journey to Bethlehem. And raising himself to an elbow, he looked upon the hearth to see if the oaten cakes were cooking there. But the hearth was empty. He felt for the pouch around his waist. No longer did it hang there to hold his gold. Where was it? Where had the gold gone? The winter solstice was at hand. He must hurry to reach Bethlehem in time for the birth. Of its own accord, the doorway of the monastery opened, and in there came oxen and goats and a dog. The noises they made were those of the beasts to a loving master. They came, rubbing heads against his limbs, while the dog licked eagerly at his hand and whined. Good, said Bernardino, we'll go together. Holding fast by the oxen's horns, he raised himself, and putting his arms over their necks, he walked with them, not to the door, not outside into the winter's night, but across the hall, along the cloisters to the chapel door. It did not seem strange that they should enter the church together, enter and kneel, nor did it seem strange that where the altar had been, there was a manger. The light from tapering candles filled the rude stall to overflowing. It shone upon Mary's face, she kneeling as they knelt. It shone upon the angels' choir, their wings interlaced, their hands raised in salutation. But far more radiant than these, it shone upon the face of the child, lying quietly upon his straw. See, we are come, little Holy One, or is it thou hast come to us? What matters it? It is the night of the birth. We are here at last to worship. Very tenderly, Bernardino held out the forefinger of his right hand and worked it slowly within the small, closed fist of the child. He felt it tighten, a strong, tight-holding grip. The child's eyes opened, and there was in them the look of one long known, long loved. But others who had come to worship had brought gifts. Again, Bernardino felt for the pouch and found it gone. Then did he look up, wondering, perplexed, and saw an angel's hand extended, holding a leather pouch. It's yours. Take it. We have but kept it for you. When the brothers gathered in the hall, there to form the processional for early mass, they found the hearth deserted. Going to the chapel, they looked with consternation upon the ancient figure kneeling there, the creatures about him. The Father Superior paused to awaken him, and then he saw, as did all the brothers, at what lowly place the peasant was worshiping, a manger, although to them no manger was visible. The child, for only upon a child did the human soul so pour forth such love and adoration. They could have sworn on Holy Writ that clasped within the ancient wrinkled hand there lay that of a young child. What they did see was the pouch beside him. The gold, they whispered to one another. It was in such a leather pouch he brought his offering for the church, so the records say. 10 pieces of gold it held when they counted it. Look, here are now the same 10 pieces within. As the spring drew near, the brothers talked often of Bernardino's going, the time and manner of it. He was a good man. None better ever walked the earth. He consecrated his life as a true follower of Jesus the Christ. We ourselves have done no more. That strange idea he had about the manger, the coming to worship there before all other places. It was not strange that out of talk such as this should have come the wish to honor Bernardino's memory. Of all things he would have liked best, said the Father Superior, what say you? And so it came to pass that throughout the full green of spring, the sweet lagging of summer, the glowing of the plenty of garnered harvest, those brothers who could carve bent all their skill and time upon the making of a manger and figures to kneel around it. When the next Christmas Eve came, the manger was placed full lovingly upon the steps of the altar. There were Mary and Joseph, angels in attendance, and kneeling among the shepherds, the brothers had made the figure of Bernardino hold out his offering of gold to the child. That was the first nativity put into a Spanish church. That was the first Christmas Mass sung to the child. It has made this birth everlasting, and in the kneeling figure of Bernardino has come down the memory of a great and simple man. You may be seated. Let's just have a moment of quiet, a moment of peace as we bring our prayers to God, the God who listens, the God who is always present with us. I invite you to bring to mind those things about which you may be concerned or worried, those gifts of presence for which you are truly grateful, and lift them up into the light. God of love and light, we see a world that needs your presence as much as it did the incarnation of Christ in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. Hope, peace, joy, and love can be hard to find. Despair, violence, sorrow, and hate seem to be everywhere we look. Oh, how this world is broken. We are broken. But you've shown us, gracious God, that the broken and the barren are central to your presence, to your redemption, your salvation. So many people whose stories we know and love in the Bible were broken and confused, and they were beautiful participants in co-creating your beloved community here on earth. So come to us in our brokenness. Come to us in the looming darkness. Be born in us. Transform the world through us. Recreate us to be your people. Hopeful, peacemaking people, joyful people, loving people. Remind us of the beauty within, whatever we're feeling and experiencing. God of the impossible, keep us mindful that hope is not wishing for what is not here, but trusting in what is unseen, trusting in what you are already doing. Give us always the hope to pray for transformation, for beauty, for joy, for peace. Keep our hopes large, for nothing is impossible with you. Be born in us today, Emmanuel, God with us. Amen. It's our practice at Eagle Harbor Church to receive an offering on Christmas Eve, which we then give to the Christmas Fund of the United Church of Christ. This is a fund that offers financial support to retired ministers and missionaries or folks who are serving the church professionally who have a special need, like a hearing aid they can't afford, or some health care that is beyond their means to pay for. So we invite your generosity as you give to the offering this evening, and we will give it away for you, a gift of your presence.
Son